In this video, we'll see how to use subplots to look at multiple graphs on the same figure window. I know you might be thinking we already looked at multiple graphs on the same figure window, but earlier they shared the same axes, and now we're going to be able to put two plots on the same figure window with each with their own axes. So that's called subplots. Let's go ahead and clear in CLC and start fresh. The subplot command, let's make a quick note about it. This will divide the graphing area into a grid. The format is subplot MNP. And I'll tell you what each of those things are. Where the grid that you're dividing into is M by N. So M rows and N columns. And P is the next active portion where the next plot goes. Let's do it. So I'm going to get some, let's do pi again. Let's do some trig. So I'll say x goes from 0 to 2 pi in increments of pi over 20. If this looks too choppy, you can always make your increments smaller and get a smoother graph. And I'll go all the way to 2 pi. Don't forget to suppress the output. You don't want to look at a giant list of x values. And then I'm going to use this command subplot. So subplot, and it's giving me my help here, MNP. M by N is the size I want. So if I want a 2 by 1, that's 2 rows and 1 column, those are the numbers I use. Then I say, okay, where does the next plot go? In space number 1, or entry number 1. And this is going to count, by the way, it's going to index those positions in exactly the same way MATLAB indexes a matrix. So if you had a 3 by 3, it would go position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is just telling MATLAB, hey, focus on the first spot because of the 1 right here. It's a 2 by 1, but I'm saying turn your focus to the first spot, and this is where this plot goes. So plot x, and for the y values, we'll use sine x. Nothing too crazy. Let's get an x label in there. These are the angles because they're the x values for this trig, and they'll be in radians. Remember, by default, MATLAB is working in radians unless you specifically tell it degrees. Y label, these will be sines, sine of x, let's say. And then let's change the focus to the next part of the subplot grid. So I still use the same M and N. I don't want to change the shape now. The shape is going to be consistent. What I want to change is the focus. So I say, okay, still a 2 by 1, but now let's look at the second spot and put something in there. So I'm shifting focus to second spot in this grid. And let's see, what can I plot here? X, sine of 2 times x. Again, this will change the frequency, and that's fine. Let's give it an x label. Every graph deserves labels and axis labels and a title. Let's call this angle. Still the same x, that hasn't changed, but the y label is different. So let's say sine, double sine. Okay, let us run it and see. I know I didn't put titles on there, so I'm aware, but let's run it and see. I want to show you where the axis labels show up. So run section, I have a 2 by 1 grid. Remember, the first number is always the number of rows, second number is the number of columns. So this is a 2 by 1 grid with one position here and the second position, that double sign here. All right, and I didn't select the axes, I let MATLAB choose it. You can fix the axes for each of these. You can add a legend separately for each of these. All that stuff can happen. We just didn't do that part. All right, and we could change the size of this window if we want. We could dock it if we want, but let us try something. In fact, I'm going to close this and say you try switching this from a 2 by 1 grid to a 1 by 2 grid. And if you pause it and do that, then we'll catch up and I'll show you how to do it in a minute. Okay, so if you've done this, then what we need to change is in this subplot. Remember, the subplot, the first two numbers define the size of the grid. It was 2 by 1. If I change it to 1 by 2 everywhere it appears, then when I run this section, I get a side by side. So 2 columns and 1 row. All right, so that's how to use subplot. This will be very useful to us as we go through our course. It's nice because you get different axes, but you can still get them in the same figure window. All right, that's all for now. I'll see you next time.